Hello, everyone. Welcome to Furthering Christendom, advancing the kingdom one mind at a time. I am your co-host, Mike Devito, here with the good doctor, Dr. Tyler McNabb. And this is episode 0, where we just want to lay out some of the basics of what we're doing here, kind of the vision moving forward, what we're thinking for this project. But first, why don't we start by giving a little bit of our background, where we come from, and maybe a little bit of our testimony. So Tyler, why don't I kick it over to you first? Kind of just a little bit about your bio and how you came to Christ.
Yeah, wonderful. My name's Tyler McNabb, if haven't already realized. I have a PhD in philosophy from the University of Glasgow, and I'm an assistant professor of philosophy here at the University of St. Joseph in McNabb. So I live a little bit of ways from Mike, at least for now. We are separated, but I have been married for 11 years to Priscilla, and we have 4 kids, Eden, Elijah, Ezra, and Eva Maria. I mainly publish, at least what I'm known for, is in religious epistemology, though I do a little bit of metaphysics and analytic theology here and there, and political philosophy. But religious epistemology is sort of my main thing that I do. For testimony-wise, so I grew up in a home in Houston where we were raised Christian, but we didn't really go to church much. Maybe off and on, a couple different seasons here and there. Went to church sometimes on Christmas and Easter, but we weren't super faithful, so to speak. We did have several Bibles for the house, and I did try to do prayers at night before I fell asleep, but that was the extent of our Christianity for the most part. Outside of, on occasion, I would think about questions about whether I knew that God existed or not, or whether there were good arguments for God's existence. And these sort of plagued me. And when I got to a senior in high school, they finally worried me so much, they bothered me so much that I was just like, actually, I don't know if God exists. I don't know if Christianity is true. And I was ready to become an atheist. And I decided, I said, God, if you are there, if you exist, show me tonight, that you exist, or I'm done. I'm going to be an atheist. I'm going to live my life as I see fit. I'm going to just kind of live the best life I can and, die, and that's it. So I gave God one night, so to speak, and I did what any good millennial would do, which is I Googled, proofs for God's existence. And I came across Old Testament passages like Isaiah 53, and Daniel 9:24 through 26, and some others that really, when I read them, I really found myself thinking that, hey, this looks like Jesus. This looks like Jesus of the New Testament. I was in church enough, at least, to get a basic picture of Jesus. Went to some Christian schools, so I had some general ideas of what the Gospels contained, the particular narratives, and I found myself compelled to think that that's Jesus. So I was kind of shocked by this, given that the Old Testament passages were long before Jesus came. And so all of a sudden I began to think that the New Testament was indeed inspired by God. So I found myself late the next morning on my way to school, and as a good senior would do, if you're already late and you're going through an existential crisis, you don't go straight to class, right? I pulled over to the side of the road in a Starbucks parking lot, and I said, I got to get this straight. I believe this is the inspired word of God, but is Jesus really is he really God? And so I did the unpardonable sin, right? I got a Bible and just kind of like opened up and placed my finger and said, God, if Jesus really is God, if he's really you, show me. And by God's grace, I didn't get to a passage where it was like Jesus slept, or Jesus got tired and hungry, or something like that. No, I got to a passage where Jesus forgave sin, and people were just amazed about that his ability to be able to forgive sin. And so I found myself thinking that, all right, Jesus is God. This is it. I closed my Bible, right? Just closed it up. And I felt the Holy Spirit. There's no other really way to articulate what happened to me, but I felt God's presence. I felt it tangible. I felt just joy and happiness, and I can't really describe it in words besides joy, happiness, and just feeling close. This sort of tangibility of the Spirit. And basically, I was completely changed. I'd come home, rush home, open up the Bible, started spending my afternoons after school looking up commentary and listening to lectures about the Bible, and all of this became really important to me. Fast forward a little bit, I went through a year into college doing a BA in biblical studies, and close to when I was graduating, all of a sudden I had this 1 year of darkness, great plague, so to speak, where I was just really harmed with doubts constantly in my mind. And I kept trying to put these doubts away. And I got into philosophy. And the deeper I got into philosophy, the more I realized that there were really smart people in the world, a lot smarter than I was. And I was worried that somehow they could prove to me that someone could prove to me one day, like I could be out evangelizing and someone come up to me, maybe a philosophy professor, and say, actually, your arguments for God's existence aren't really good. Here's why, X, Y, Z, and then totally just wreck my faith, showed that I wasn't rational in my faith, and all my years of Christianity and Christian ministry are wasted. And this really just bothered me. And fast forward again a little bit, I got into graduate school, and at 20, I think I was 20, yeah. And I started reading Plantinga's Warranted Christian Belief and realized that you don't have to have good arguments to know that God exists. You don't have to have good arguments to be rational, to have rational faith. And you can trust your intuitions. You can trust what appears to you to be the case. And that was quite helpful. And that allowed me to actually look really objectively at the arguments from natural theology, and allowed me to think that some of them were actually really persuasive too. And that helped my faith, that helped my credence. And I got into philosophy and I was like, you know what, this is really good stuff. I want to continue doing this. I want to do this even longer. And so, yeah, that's about it. If someone asks me today, why are you a Christian? I've tried. There's actually were times where I've tried to say, like, I'm going to believe that Jesus is in a tomb somewhere right now, or he's buried somewhere. And thinking about his skeleton, or remains of whatever would be, that would still be there. Like, I find that really hard to believe, that Jesus died and was left in a tomb somewhere, or was buried in a grave of some sort. It's just really hard for me to move myself to believe that. And it's really hard for me to believe that God doesn't exist, that there's not. There's times during my PhD studies where I'd come home absolutely mentally and spiritually exhausted from discussing with my colleagues all day about God's existence, and my children would run up to me and say, "Daddy," and grab me, and I'd hug them and fully embrace them, and I just found myself believing that God was present, that God exists, that He's love. And I can't explain it besides, these sorts of statements that would come to my mind. My credence level would just spike through the roof when I felt the love of my children. And so, yeah, I do think there are good arguments for God's existence, but honestly, I can't kick the belief. That's why I believe. I don't think belief is something that we have direct control over, and my experiences have been such that I'm moved to believe in the gospel, to believe in God's existence. So that's about it. What about you, Mike?
Oh, that's good, brother. Listen, if a good high school student is pulling over their car on their way to school to deal with their existential questions and opening up the Bible, I'm not going to tell you what I was pulling over my car to do as a senior in high school. No, that's good, brother. Yeah, I grew up in a house that same idea. Wasn't very religious. A good old school Italian household. My dad's name's Vinny. He's from Brooklyn and he owns a construction company. So if that gives you any idea into my upbringing. But yeah, no, it was, we went to my Nana. My Nana was very religious, Episcopalian in church. And so we would go on holidays, Easter, Christmas to church, but grew up with no real religious background outside of that. And it actually wasn't until college that I came to Christ. I was a junior in college, and my best friend, Matt Mulligan, who I played in the NFL with for 3 years, and we lived together, played football at the University of Maine together. He saw that I was searching. I had been having some questions, same idea, some questions about what this life is all about. I had a close friend who had passed away at 24 years old, and I was like, man, there's got to be something more going on here. Unlike you, Tyler, my experience was very much just that, experiential. There wasn't much headiness. There wasn't much propositional knowledge or propositional dialectic when it came to reaching this conclusion. It was totally experience. My buddy Matt says, hey, I see that you're searching. And my buddy Matt had grown up in church. He went to an old school Pentecostal church up in northern Maine, which is actually where I'm broadcasting from right now. Just a little side note, Tyler, I don't think, outside of you and I, the people listening to this will probably have not been to Macau, China, or northern Maine. So, so my best friend Matt takes me to his church, and before we go, he kind of gives me the heads up, like, hey, listen, this is a Pentecostal church, and you're going to see people speaking in tongues. You're going to see people falling out and running around the aisles and doing all this. And I remember thinking, I just want to go to witness this. Like, that's the craziest thing I've ever heard of. I'm used to church with the pews, and you stand up and you kneel down, and so I was like, you know what, I'm going just to check this out. Again, not totally sold on the idea, but just had to witness this firsthand. And so my buddy Matt takes me to his church, and just like he says, everybody's doing that, running around and speaking in tongues. And I'm like, wow, this is wild. I can't believe this is what church is like. And if anybody's been to these churches before, at the end of each service, they do an altar call where basically they take all the madness that's going on around the church and condense it up into the front, right? So everybody comes up to the front of the altar and they pray and worship together. And as somebody who wasn't a believer, and especially not of that variety, I remember sitting in the back in the pews and saying, I am not going up there. No way. Like, there is no way. But if you've been to these churches, if you don't know Jesus, you are coming up to the front. They're going to make sure you're coming up to the front. And so finally, after kicking and scratching, they clawed me up there. And I remember putting my head down to pray and just saying, God, if you're real, just please get me out of here as fast as possible. This is incredibly uncomfortable. But then I remember the pastor and the assistant pastor came over and they laid their hands on me. And the best way I can describe it is just electricity through my body. And kind of like you were talking about, Tyler, I didn't need arguments. I didn't need evidence. It was just this emotional, religious experience that made me realize, oh, wow, this is true. This is right. This is it. This is what I need to be pursuing. There, it was like the light switch was turned on and everything became bright. And so, yeah, so that was my kind of salvation experience. Now this happened in 2006. So I'm a senior in college, playing football at the University of Maine. And a few months later, I would get an opportunity to play in the NFL. 2007, I came out of college and was signed by the New York Jets in April 2007, which, being from Brooklyn, New York, was a team that I grew up rooting for. My family's from New York. Everybody's from that area. So it was really exciting. So I had come to Christ at the perfect time, because anybody who knows anything about the NFL knows how difficult that life can be at times. And so I had, I was going in not only physically prepared and mentally prepared, but spiritually prepared. And I spent 9 years in the NFL, 6 years with the Jets and 3 years with the Kansas City Chiefs. I retired in 2016. And my process after coming to Christ became a much more intellectual journey, which was interesting because being a meathead who smashes his head for a living, reading, as you can imagine, was not my thing. But after coming to Christ, reading became a priority. I fell in love with reading, and I started studying theology. Again, my best friend Matt, who brought me to Christ, ended up playing with the Jets with me, and we would study theology together and grow together. And I'd been studying theology, and then I came across a book by Timothy Keller called The Reasons for God. And after reading that book, I said, okay, whatever he's doing here, I want to do this. And so came to find out that discipline was apologetics. And I said, okay, when I finish the NFL, I'm going to go back to school and get my degree in apologetics. And so getting done with the 2015 season, going into 2016, I retire and say, okay, Houston Baptist University, here we come. I'm signed up for their master's in philosophical apologetics. And my first course is in philosophy of religion, and the professor's name started with a McNabb, is it an M, McNabb, something like that. But no, this is where Tyler and I met, and I just remember studying philosophy of religion under Tyler, and I thought, okay, it's not theology, it's not apologetics, it's philosophy that I really am in love with. And Tyler, that's when you and I formed our brotherhood and became really close, and that was fall of 2016. And so I became addicted to philosophy, and that's kind of where I'm at. I like philosophy more than theology, and this will probably be this will probably be that statement that gets me in trouble. But the thing, I like to assign everything probabilities. I'm not big on just saying, okay, this is the way it is. And theology forces you to do that. Philosophy allows you some wiggle room. So I was like, you know what? I got in so many heated debates and discussions over theology, and then I start doing that in the philosophy context and noticed it was much more civil. And so I said, okay, not only I like this better, but I enjoy the back and forth better. And so I'm going to stick with philosophy. And so I finished up at HBU in 2018. Then Tyler helped me get into the University of Edinburgh to get my MS in philosophy, science, and religion there. And then just this past April, I got into the PhD program in philosophy at the University of Birmingham. And so that's where I am now, starting this fall, writing on the problem of divine foreknowledge and human freedom. So I'm sure a number of our guests will be specialists in that as well. And so, yeah, that's kind of, that's my story in a nutshell. I'm sure I missed some of the nuances, but you know,
it's funny. It really rings true to me as well, because before I had this experience with God in my car in high school, I was like mostly B's, maybe a couple C's, couple A's, you know, like that's my life was more concentrated in like basketball, and you know, I was really big into rapping at the time and so forth. And my life was completely like changed, where all of a sudden I was like, I don't feel like doing this anymore. I'm gonna go buy commentaries. And my parents were like, what's going on? You know, what's going on here? So
now, get those old school rap songs up on the website when we lay it out.
They're secretly hidden away somewhere. I don't even have access to them right now. But yeah, so I think I find that interesting. It seems sort of we come from a similar sort of perspective, and I'm sure some of our viewers will as well. Well, let's go ahead and map out what we plan to do with Furthering Christendom. So why don't you go ahead and help us get there?
Yeah, sure. So I think the way you and I had envisioned this, Tyler, was a sort of philosophy of religion podcast ministry where we really try to tackle and engage with some of the more nuanced, more complex issues when it comes to theism, atheism, Christianity, religious diversity, things like that. And so we want to engage with those things from different perspectives. We want to hear different perspectives. We want to address the difficult questions. And so it's apologetic in nature, but it's also not going to sacrifice any sort of intellectual rigor. We want to make sure that we're doing this in a way that represents the arguments on both sides well, and try to engage them at the front lines, right? So you might not see us start at square one here. We want to address any objections from wherever they come from, but I think as we go through and progress and as we come up with different podcast topics, we're going to want to start at the front lines of the debate, right? Whether it be problem of evil, divine hiddenness, coherence of theism, things like that. We want to get right to the front lines and address those issues and get them out there and kind of give our own perspective and sort of thought on those issues.
Right.
Yeah.
So this is going to be a little bit more academically aimed. So for those familiar with like Justin Brierley's ministry, right? Unbelievable, right? I think isn't that what his podcast is called? I think, or his radio show. That's a bit more for like bringing in at sort of a basic level and sort of building up from there and trying to get people onto a higher plane, so to speak. I think I imagine our ministry, our podcast, whatever you want to call it, it's going to be a little bit more academic centered. So people who aren't philosophers, but who read Plantinga and Craig and Swinburne and so forth will be interested in following this, as well as perhaps other philosophers, depending on the episode or the guest we bring on or that sort of thing. So that's kind of going to be the level of engagement I think we're looking at.
Yeah, and I think another issue that I don't know, we haven't talked about this, but one thing I would like to tackle as well is our Christian denominations, right? So Catholic, Tyler, you're Catholic. I'm sort of a free agent Protestant trying to figure out outside of mere Christianity,
We'll draft you.
Yeah,
Right.
that's exactly right. And so I know, at least on my side, I'm really curious to hear about your intellectual and spiritual journey into the Catholicism, into the Catholic faith. And then we'll have Jerry Walls on it. Give Jerry a little, I know he loves it. So to address some of those issues as well, I think that'll help my own spiritual formation and hopefully be fruitful to others that are listening. But I think that one thing that sometimes gets overlooked is the nuances within Christian denominations. So I'm curious to look at those from an academic and philosophical sort of perspective. And so I'm sure we'll tackle that as well.
Right.
But yes.
So
go ahead.
We're going to do podcasts.
Yeah.
We're going to have blog posts. We'll have guest blog posting as well. Right. Got one interesting one coming out, defending sort of traditional philosophy of religion and sort of encouraging everyone to take seriously the claims of philosophy of religion. We're going to have other guest posts. We're going to post stuff. Could be religion, politics, philosophy, obviously. Plus the podcast. We're going to post our articles that we publish and our books that we publish together especially, but others as well. And so it's just going to be kind of like a vehicle for us to talk and get ideas out and hopefully start conversations with various people.
Yeah, and Tyler publishes something every other week, so there'll be plenty of content on here. And every once in a while, he's generous enough to slap my name on one of them. But yeah, we'll have that. And that's a good point too, Tyler. We're going to have a bunch of experts and philosophers on here. So it won't just be Tyler and the meathead breaking stuff down. We will have other great philosophers doing, like Tyler said, doing guest podcasts, guest blog posts. And we want to hear from you all. And so if you have any questions, especially after listening to this episode, any topics that you'd like for us to touch on, it is furtheringchristendom@gmail.com. Shoot any of your questions there, and we'll make sure to get to those. Because we really want to address issues that anybody's having with religion. And so another thing, when this podcast comes out, Tyler, we will have laid out the website, right? Furtheringchristendom.com. And along with that, we are going to give away 3 copies of the Gospels, the Word on Fire Bible, the Gospels edition, which is just incredible. I mean, it's a Catholic edition. Robert Barron? Robert Barron did a fantastic job. The Word on Fire Ministries did a great job. Even coming from a Protestant, this Bible is incredible. And so we'll be giving away 3 copies of that, as well as 3 copies of a book that Tyler and I contributed a chapter to on Blaise Pascal, A History of Apologetics, that covers all the great apologetic and philosophical thinkers from the entire history of the project. So I don't know who's first on there, Tyler. Do you remember? I don't remember who.
Carter or something, maybe
Yeah,
even the Apostle Paul. I'm not sure.
that's Carter, all the way through to Descartes, Pascal, and then William A. Craig and Ravi Zacharias. And so, fantastic book. We'll be giving away 3 of those as well. And so, all you need to do to get those is sign up your email on the website. There'll be space to do that in there. So just plug your email in there, and then Tyler and I will pick some winners, and we'll send you out those resources. And we'll be doing that from time to time, especially as if we're publishing books or if there are new books coming out that we think are worthy to get out there. We'll be giving those away as well. So yeah, episode 0, brother. Here we go.
All right.
Again, send us any questions you have, and thank you so much for tuning in. Okay. Oh wait, let me do that.